So we've analyzed some of these lawsuits at the national level, some of them coming out of Illinois. It's not every day you get to sit down and talk with somebody from Illinois who's actually contributing to these national lawsuits. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. We are here at SHOT Show, and as we do, we are trying to take advantage of getting to talk with people we wouldn't ordinarily get to talk to in person. Sitting next to me is Tod Vandermyde. He is from the state of Illinois. He's been a lobbyist there for over 30 years, 25 of which he spent representing NRA. He's also the president of the Aurora Sportsman's Club, which is one of the biggest gun clubs in the state of Illinois. He also sits on the Second Amendment Law Center board as well. Tod, thanks very much for sitting down with me today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. And guys, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. We're trying to get as much information out there as we possibly can. We're getting it from the source. This is the source of Illinois litigation and legislation. So please, if you can, it really helps the algorithms. Go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to this video. So Tod, let's just jump right into it here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I'm really curious. What is 30 years of lobbying in the state of Illinois actually entail? How'd you get into it? Where are the passions here?
By accident, I bought a motorcycle. I'm by trade an operating engineer, heavy equipment operator with Local 150. And I bought a motorcycle. The fuel guy on our job said, "Do you like helmet laws?" Not particularly. And so he talked me into joining a BATE. Brotherhood Against Totalitarian Enactments was its original name. And so I joined a BATE of Illinois, and working there just as a member, I ended up getting approached to do some government relations work because my dad was a Republican precinct committeeman, and they thought that meant something. And from there, I took over a legislative spot in a chapter. I took over the legislative spot for the whole state, and our contract lobbyist was a tobacco guy, and so I learned at the elbow of a tobacco guy about lobbying, so kind of like the mod squad from Thank You for Not Smoking, or Thank You for Smoking. And with that, NRA was looking to pick up a contract guy in Illinois way back in 1991-ish, 92-ish, and I was a 2A guy, so they glommed onto me, and I ended up working there. I ended up running the government relations department at my union for a number of years. And then, I quit, left NRA, and I did some work in the industry with FFLs and stuff. And then from there, I retired a few years ago. And that's been, I'm an operator by choice, lobbyist by accident. And I've been on the board of directors for the Aurora Sportsman's Club for a number of years, was elected president last March. So we are the largest gun club in Illinois with 2,900 members. And we've got 300 acres, and we're in the middle of a huge capital program, adding 20 new ranges to our club.
How grueling is the legislative session in Illinois? Here in California, we're basically running from January all the way through August. And they're 2-year bill cycles. Is it similar over there?
2-year bill cycles, but our Constitution mandates that they're supposed to be done by May 31st. And anything after that has to take effect immediately, like the budget, because our budget year begins June 1. That what they do, or July 1, I'm sorry. And what they do is it requires a supermajority. Now, with supermajority Democratic majorities in both chambers, the House and the Senate, it doesn't mean much anymore. But before, it certainly made an impact, because then the Democrats would have to go talk to the Republicans to pass the budget. So ours runs from January to the end of May. They take a couple weeks off around Easter. They're out right now. They'll come back in about another week. So we just had the election. So this is what should be the full cycle. The second half of the cycle next year in an election year, is only supposed to be for emergency issues, but they blow that right out the water. So we're similar to you guys, except we have a 5-month window.
Gotcha. So 5-month window instead of an 8-month window, but a lot of the same tactics, probably. Well,
I think they're worse in Illinois because I don't know if you guys have seen this, but they have a favorite tactic in Illinois where they will pass a bill from one chamber to the other. And our Constitution mandates 3 days, 3 readings. The bill has to be read on 3 separate days in each chamber. So what they'll do is the House will pass a bill on insurance. And then what they'll do is they'll turn around, it'll go to the Senate, it'll go through committee, it'll sit on the floor. So it has meant 2 readings of the constitutional requirement in the Senate. It only needs a 3rd reading for final action. Well, they will find some gun control scheme, just like they did with the semi-auto ban or the latest red flag-ish law, and they will then gut the bill in the Senate, amend it, they'll send it to the floor in an hour, and then they'll vote on it. Then it goes back to the House for a concurrence vote, and they'll pass it in hours, and it's done. It's the way they did the semi-auto ban.
Yep.
It's done like that, and they don't allow any time for any opposition to steam up. They just roll right over it.
Yeah, and we've actually talked a lot about that on our channel as far as gut and amends are concerned. They get those first votes that are necessary in the California Assembly or Senate, and then they get gutted and amended. They get put in the suspense file, and with so many other bills in the suspense file, they don't even really go over them for their final reading. They just say the bill's title, and they vote yay or nay on bills basically in batches.
Right, and the title on the board says the insurance code about whatever, and yet we're talking about a gun ban.
Right, so definitely feels like you got some similar stuff going on, and sometimes it's hard to kind of peer outside of that shell. So at least for myself, as far as California is concerned, although with some of the national stage litigation that's happening now, some appeals to the Supreme Court, it's a little bit easier to see. But I'm curious if your legislative process in Illinois is the same as California. Are you seeing some of these same infringements as far as laws are concerned come down as we're seeing here in California? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, it seems that they plant the seeds to grow stuff in California, and we've always said don't Californicate our state, because whatever seems to start out you. And what I think that's a growth of is they think they can get just about anything passed in California, so the anti-gunners start using you as the laboratory, and then as they hit Colorado, Massachusetts, Jersey, New York, they start refining it. And then we usually end up with a 2.0 or 3.0 version in Illinois. As litigation works out, things like that, they start to get a little smarter. We saw that recently with what called Karina's Law about confiscating firearms from people under orders of protection. And they got a little smarter. They don't like it when I still show up and testify from time to time, even though I'm not lobbying actively.
Sure.
And I think they ought to be getting CLE credits for the lawyers on the committee for the schooling I usually give them on what's currently taking place in litigation and how, no, this is what this court said, so on. So yeah, we usually see like the 2.0 version or so from what you guys get. Right now, the big thing is red flag stuff, confiscation of firearms. One of the other things, they're going after a whole new safe storage mantra to where if it's not on your person, it has to be unloaded and locked up even in your home.
Yep.
Which I think they're going to run into problems with. But that leads into a bunch of other stuff. So we've got that. And on our safe storage stuff, I would even go so far as back in the 90s, Mayor Daley sued the industry. They were part of that beginning, try to sue the industry out of existence stuff, and it was Chicago v. Beretta. And it went all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court. The Illinois Supreme Court said you can't ascribe third-party liability when there's an intervening act. And so in the new safe storage law, if a prohibited person or somebody breaks into your house, steals your firearm, you can be civilly liable for anything that happens with that firearm.
Yep.
So they're trying to make firearms ownership litigation dependent in 2 cost prohibitive that, somebody could come. Even though the Illinois Supreme Court says you can't do this, there's an intervening act. There's a criminal act by a third party, and we don't know if that gun's been handed off, resold 2 or 3 times, whatever. And all of that negates this, but they're going to try anyways.
Well, it certainly seems like you have your hands full there, but let's talk about what else is filling up your hands on the litigative side. CRPA did file an amicus brief for FFL versus Pritzker. I'm wondering, can you just, from your perspective, give us the laws, give us the breakdown on this case. What were the laws that were created and how were they challenged?
Okay, so they start off, it's called the Protect Illinois Communities Act. It's a gun ban that when they got a real supermajority of Democrats in the House and Senate and a left-wing governor, they turned around and they were going to jam this through. And they had every town and Giffords and everybody behind the scenes. And they have all these non-gun people writing a gun law, and they really don't know what they're talking about. So we got the worst of the worst in certain places. And part of it is, it wasn't just sale. It was, if you wanted to keep what you had to register it, and they went after parts and accessories. So they made it illegal to sell parts for an AR-15. Wow. And they, and if you wanted to keep your parts, you had to register your parts, which is ridiculous. Yeah. As a guy who used to be an FFL, I'm not sure I could find all the parts that I had. So with that, they did that. They required the registration. And so what happened was, working with the FFLs that I knew, I reached out to them and said, look, everybody is going to do what they always do. They're going to attack this as a gun and magazine ban. He said, if you follow Duncan from your state, that's been litigated for over 10 years. The single subject of magazines could take up the entire briefings. So rather, let's do this a little differently. And I reached out to Chuck Michelle and his law firm. I said, I got some guys that are interested in a suit, and I think we want to tackle this differently. And so what the FFL lawsuit did was it tackled guns, parts, and registration. And so the parts thing is a concept, if you've heard about, like with cars and motorcycles and machinery, right to repair. John Deere's in a big fight over that stuff right now. Mm-hmm. So the theory here is very simple, and this is where, working with Chuck, we're trying to develop 3-dimensional litigation. We're not thinking about the gun ban that's in front of our nose. We're thinking about the moves in a 4-dimensional chess game down the road. So right to repair goes like this. According to Ezell, Rhonda Ezell, there's a plug for my girl Rhonda, who she was the lead plaintiff in a SAF lawsuit that found the range ban in Chicago unconstitutional back in the early 2000s. All right? So part of Ezell, if you read it, says an ancillary right protected by the Second Amendment is the right to train and maintain proficiency. So if I have the right to train and maintain proficiency, don't I have the right to keep my firearm in good working order?
Sure.
So it's in a safe condition, so I can use it to maintain my proficiency. So if I have the right to repair my firearm, you can't stop me from buying parts. I have to be able to buy the parts to repair my firearm. We know they're mechanical objects. Things wear out on them, right? So you got that. So the other part is, if I have the right to repair my firearm, then if I amass all the parts, would I not have the right to build my own firearm?
Right.
If I have the right to build my own firearm, then the next step would be, don't I have the right to make my own firearm? Whether it be 3D printed, machining, whatever, because if going back to text, tradition, history, and Second Amendment litigation that the court has set down, well, go back to 1791. During the Revolutionary War, prior to that, most of our firearms were either made in small batches by gunsmiths and small homegrown type guys. I mean, they used to hammer out flat stock into an octagon barrel. That was a big, trade back then. And the term lock, stock, and barrel comes from you guys that specialized in locks. guys that specialized in barrels, guys that specialized in the stocks, and you would acquire all those and then assemble them into a firearm. The original Springfield Armory, the reason it's cross cannons on the logo was that's what they made. They made cannons. So going back to the tradition of our country is that we either bought them and imported them from overseas, because we didn't have big firearms manufacturers at the time of the Revolution, or we looked to small blacksmiths, small companies that made their own. So if we prevail on this concept going all the way through, we now have, it attacks ghost guns that we can build our own guns. I hate the term ghost guns, but home-built firearms, they can't outlaw us building that because that is the tradition of our country. And if you go back to the militia laws, you were fined if you showed up with a non-functioning firearm. And that's the kind of litigation that I've been pushing and working on, with Chuck and trying to say we don't need to be, yes, we don't like the ban that's in front of our face. But
is there a goal there to shape national litigation, not just for Illinois? So it's almost like you're going into this lawsuit knowing that it's going to get appealed and appealed and appealed. So you're really trying to take a 360 approach that's going to help shape Second Amendment litigation nationally for the better. Is that sort of where you're saying you're coming from?
And there's a couple other things. I think Rahimi wasn't as bad for us as some guys say. I think and if you take Rahimi, there was a case that came out right before Rahimi called Jarksy, which was about an individual who was fined by an administrative court with the Security and Exchange Commission for securities fraud. And the Supreme Court ruled that they're going to fine him $250,000. And they said, no, he has to have an Article III court with a jury of his peers to assess the fine. Well, if you extrapolate that out, that means, how do you sit there and say we're going to penalize a guy monetarily, $250,000, which to him might not be all that much, but we could have our right to own a firearm stripped of us simply by an administrative function. In Illinois, we have the FOID card. And all of a sudden, and all the FOID card stuff is done ad hoc administratively. Clear and present danger reports by police departments are filed anonymously in through a portal that they can, based on a police department's accusation, no criminal charges, no nothing else, revoke your right to own a firearm or possess a firearm. So if we take Jarksy and we take Rahimi and add them together, I think there is a way to go after a bunch of these administrative functions and turn it on its ear.
Well, certainly some more things to look forward to. We're already looking forward to so much in 2025 as far as litigation is concerned. But yeah, I mean, you make a good idea, and the logical trail that you're kind of creating here, it seems like if it's presented to the right people, it's only a matter of time before we end up being victorious in those. I'm also sort of curious. I do see that you're running as a reform candidate for the NRA board.
Yep.
I was wondering if you could just speak about that a little bit. What is it that you see going into that, and what would your goals be?
Let's see. So having worked for NRA in a blue state, I watched how we got left behind at times, that we didn't get a lot of money put into campaigns or elections. And we used to have to scrape for every nickel we could get. And I don't think NRA has been, I think we ought to be having sharp elbows and bare knuckles when we get into these fights, whether it's in the courtroom or in the legislatures or in campaigns. And I think that there are blue states where there are things that we can do to improve the political climate. And I think we need to be looking hard at that. We've spent $200 million on the Brewer law firm over this stupid lawsuit in New York. If we'd have put half of that money into legislatures and elections and put $100 million into litigation, where do you think we'd be today on the two-way front? And I think the board is too big, but my goals, the NRA, Giffords and every town are all bashing their chest, oh, we took down the NRA. I'm here to give them the 800-pound gorilla they always feared, and I think that's what the NRA can be. NRA should not be sucking hind tit in the litigation world. SAF has done a great job of picking up the slack when NRA dropped the ball. FPC has gotten out there and gotten into a bunch of this stuff, and they're throwing some sharp elbows and bare knuckles in what they're fighting. The NRA shouldn't be at the end of the line on that. They should be leading the charge, and they potentially have the budget to really do that. And I think they have the ability to go in and affect real change. I've also heard that for whatever reason, members of Congress are no longer looking to NRA as a leader in legislative fronts. And I think that has to change. I think the NRA, they were the only organization that put lobbyists in all 50 states. And I think we have to build stronger relationships with our state associations like CRP and, work hand in hand with them. Say, look, we got guys that live there. They're on the ground. They kind of have a feeling for what's going on. And I think that you don't just come in and elbow them out of the way. So I think we need to get the fiscal house in order so we can do things that are important, like three-dimensional litigation like we've talked about. And, we should be, we know that we are overtaxing the Illinois Attorney General's office in litigation. And if we filed another dozen lawsuits, I think they would break down and cry. But they got to be smart lawsuits, not just slinging spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks. Let's look at this, not for today, but let's set something up so that whenever we lose the White House or Congress again, that we've got court rulings that really put us out of handcuffs on these legislators.
Well, then how do you see, and that's definitely something that we're going to be following along with, just as far as the elections are concerned there, and the presence that they can end up bringing on the national stage in the years to come. I do agree with you. I think that's extremely important to have that presence there. Whether you got an administration that's favorable to you or not, the advocacy needs to be there. So definitely hoping that the horizon has more ups than it does downs as we continue to move forward there. My final question to you would be, how do you see 2025 shaping out on the national stage as far as litigation is concerned?
Well, I think everybody was holding their breath over Snope right now and seeing what happens with Snope and Ocean State Tactical. Friday we could hear what's going to happen. I think we're all getting a little nervous that it hasn't been granted cert at this point. So the problem with trying to make guesses on 2025 is that what is the Trump administration going to do in all of the rulemaking stuff? Because
Sure.
We've had the zero tolerance, we've got bump stocks, we've got pistol braces, FRTs, home-built guns. All right, so there's 5 rules and regulations, and if they pull them all back, then there's a lot of litigation out there that just goes away because.
Right.
And so I wish the court would rule on the frame and receivers rule, and I like it when they kind of put the Chevron deference. The Supreme Court took out the agency deference last year, but now if we put some real teeth into things to where the ATF, now I'm hoping that under Trump we're going to get, Mr. Trump, if you're watching this, I'm available to be director of the ATF. I promise I will cut the budget and save you money.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's hard. I think that in Illinois, if they take Snope, I think our case gets put on hold. If they take Snope but push it to the next term in October, then I'm not sure if Judge Easterbrook on the Court of Appeals would hold it up, or if his ego is big enough to sit there and want to put something through to just poke Thomas in the eye one more time. I don't know.
Right.
But I think that the question is, when is the Supreme Court going to put their foot down and, we meant Bruin. We meant what we said. I would ideally like to see Jim Jordan and Chuck Grassley start holding hearings on the way the Ninth Circuit treated you guys on Duncan and everything, and the way they just snatched it back as a comeback case and didn't let the 3-judge panel go through things. I'd like to see them haul the chief judge from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in and say, what was this game you played over here on Maryland shall issue, and let this case languish for 13 months, then pluck it out without a 3-judge when you saw you were going to lose. I mean, I think that if you're going to impeach federal judges, it starts with the House. And if we've got you want to throw some elbows? Okay, hey, and if Justice Roberts sits there and continues to put his thumb down on two-way litigation, then I think, it's time to replace him. And I think Judge Van Dyke out of the Ninth would be an excellent candidate for the United States Supreme Court. It's hard to say because in Illinois, I think the last count I counted a dozen lawsuits. You've got 3 lawsuits on our clear and present danger. You've got a lawsuit on mass transit. You've got, there are 4 lawsuits in Southern Illinois, Naperville, Herrera. So there's at least 6 or 7 on the semi-auto issue at different stages. Viramontes was argued, 8, so I forgot about Viramontes. I think there's going to be more circuit court wins. I think we're going to get a mixed boat within the Court of Appeals because good states don't pass bad gun laws, and we never get into the good court districts.
Right.
That's why I think there's a chance to do a couple of national things in the Fifth Circuit like they've done on pistol braces, bump stocks, and the like. And I think the more stuff we can get down in the Fifth Circuit, that'll bubble up and we'll get good rulings that'll help us along the way. I think 2025 is going to be a good year for us overall litigation-wise. It's hard to nail down. You guys got so much stuff going on in California, from your ammo background checks with Rhodey to Duncan with the magazine ban to your own semi-auto ban. You've prevailed on 1 gun a month. All that kind of stuff.
The roster too. So yeah, I think that there's definitely enough content, and I tend to agree with you and be optimistic. I think that we've got a lot to look forward to in 2025, but it does seem like there can be a lot of alleviation if at the very tippy top there at the Supreme Court we do, I guess as you said it, really come down and say, hey, we meant what we said in Bruin.
Yeah.
So definitely looking forward to that. Well, Todd, I really appreciate you coming on. You got a lot of wisdom. I appreciate you imparting that upon us. So thank you very much for meeting with us and talking today.
Oh, thank you for having me on here.
Absolutely. And guys, if you like videos like this, you want to continue to see this content, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. We're trying to get as much information out there, and it really helps the algorithms to push it out as far as it can go. Again, we're trying to educate as well as we can from the source. This is where the lobbying and the litigation is coming from in Illinois. By subscribing and liking, you can take part in that litigative and legislative fight as well. So go ahead and do that. And thanks again, guys. We'll see you on the next one.